Harlan Ellison is the indisputable bad boy of science fiction. He had a lifelong feud with Star Trek. He got into a fistfight with author Charles Platt at the Nebula Awards. He was inappropriate with Connie Willis on stage at the Hugo Awards. He would sue anyone at the drop of a hat. I like to call him the greatest writer who never was, because he never really wrote a science fiction novel that really was of any note. Now, I know, if you really search, you can find one or two novels with his name on it, but Ellison mostly stuck to short fiction, short stories, novelettes, and novellas, but he never had that one masterpiece that his peers had, like Asimov's Foundation, or Bradbury's Martian Chronicles, or Clarke's Childhood's End, or Le Guin's Left Hand of Darkness. Again, he did write a lot of short stories, especially in the 50s and 60s. In fact, he has over 1,700 short works, including scripts to his name. So, today I want to talk about Harlan Ellison, the bad boy of science fiction. Who am I? I am Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen who is a speculative detective investigating all things in the world of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And I've been wanting to do a Harlan Ellison video for a while because he is such an interesting character. Love him or hate him, and there's reasons to go either way, which we'll get into. There's no denying that he was a force in the science fiction community. Ellison was born in Ohio in 1934 and was expelled from college after hitting a professor who he thought insulted his writing. And that pretty much sets the stage for his life as a writer.
And these are stories I wrote for a penny a word when I was first starting. 1950s, 1960s, got booted out of Ohio State University after punching a professor in the throat who told me I had no talent and would never sell a word. And I went to New York and I sold, I think, 1955, and I sold 2 stories. In 1955 and 1956, I sold 100 stories. And the career has been going for 60-some years since. And right at the start, I sent every single published story to that college professor. His name was Shed at Ohio State University. And after the first couple of hundred, I stopped sending them because I've had 1,700 stories published. The first few novels that were published, anytime I got an award, or National Book Award or something like that, or from the Writers Guild, I would have it laminated and I would send it to them. And in my off hours, I would have dreams of the drawer in which Shed would shove this crap, and then the drawer would become a niche, and then the niche would get too big and there would have to be a hutch, and the hutch would expand and would become, at some point, a little addition to his house, and then finally it would crash in and kill him.
Like a lot of speculative writers in the 50s, he wrote short stories for the pulp magazines, back when you could earn a lot more money at short fiction than you could with writing novels. He was a big fan of short fiction, even starting his own fanzine, developing his chops as an editor, which would help him down the road, which we'll get to in a bit. The 1960s were Ellison's heydays. He started winning awards for short fiction, Hugo's for Repent Harlequin, said the TikTok man, and I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Maybe his most well-known work was a novella called A Boy and His Dog, which later became a movie with a very young Don Johnson and a not-so-young Jason Robards. This was the decade Ellison moved to Hollywood and became a scriptwriter, writing for the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Flying Nun. Oh, and he also wrote a script for Star Trek, called City on the Edge of Forever, which won a Hugo for dramatic presentation and started his feud with Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek. Roddenberry at that time was actively seeking notable science fiction writers to give more cachet to Star Trek, and hired Ellison to write the script. This is the episode when Kirk, Spock, and McCoy travel through a portal back to the 1930s and meets Edith Keeler, who's played by none other than Joan Collins. Well, it just was impossible to include everything that Ellison put in the script. They were already over budget, and Ellison wanted 9-foot guardians, woolly mammoths, fancy environmental suits. Also, initially, the script called for this underground black market drug ring that was being run aboard the Enterprise. Roddenberry had Ellison make several rewrites, and eventually Roddenberry took over rewriting the script with D.C. Fontana. Ellison was enraged and wanted his name credit to be changed to Cordwainer Bird, the pseudonym he used when he didn't want to be associated with a project. Roddenberry threatened that Ellison would be blacklisted and never work in television again. In the end, the writing credit did use Harlan Ellison's name, and he wasn't blacklisted, but Ellison raised a big stink about the whole affair, even publishing his original script to prove how much better his was. And at the Hugo Awards, he dedicated the award to the memory of the script they butchered. This was also the decade when Ellison published what I think is one of the great contributions to speculative fiction, Dangerous Visions, when he wasn't the writer, but he was the editor. It's an anthology of stories, original stories, cutting-edge stories at that time, of some of the greatest writers of speculative fiction, including Frederick Pohl, Robert Bloch, the guy who wrote Psycho, Philip Jose Farmer, Philip K. Dick, Larry Niven, Poul Anderson, Samuel Delany, Fitz Leiber, J.G. Ballard, and on and on. Several of the stories won Hugo and Nebula Awards, including Riders of the Purple Wage by Philip Jose Farmer and I and Gomorrah by Samuel Delany. If you are at all interested in short speculative fiction, I highly recommend Dangerous Visions, which was followed up by a second volume called Again Dangerous Visions. If Ellison brought together some of the most amazing, talented, speculative writers for Dangerous Visions, he did it again with Again Dangerous Visions. There are original stories by Kurt Vonnegut, Ray Bradbury, Ursula K. Le Guin, Joanna Russ, Ben Bova, Gene Wolfe, Dean Koontz, and many others. Several entries were, again, award-winning, like The Word for World is Forest by Ursula K. Le Guin and When It Changed by Joanna Russ. Ellison had planned a third Dangerous Visions book, tentatively titled The Last Dangerous Visions. Now, the first anthology was published in 1968, the second in 1972. The third volume was scheduled to be published in 1973. Well, it was never published because Ellison never finished editing it, even though he sat on it for over 40 years. This would create a lot of criticism from his fellow writers since he was sitting on their submissions and not doing anything with it. And some of these writers even passed away waiting. Heck, Harlan Ellison passed away in 2018, never having completed it. Why didn't Ellison ever finish this anthology? Why did he never write long fiction? There's some speculation that Ellison was obsessed with needing to be respected as a literary figure and was afraid of submitting anything less than amazing. It seems like this led to terminal procrastination that only got worse the older he got. Sometimes, in order to force himself to write, he set himself in a display window of a bookstore, and I think the first one was Change of Hobbit in Berkeley, where he sat at a typewriter and wrote. Neil Gaiman recounts a time when he was visiting Harlan Ellison and an editor stopped by, and Ellison told Gaiman to keep the editor busy while he ran upstairs to finish a story that was overdue. Let me know down in the comments why you think Ellison procrastinated. And while you're there, like this video and consider subscribing to my channel if you want more videos like this. Ellison also liked to sue a lot, especially for copyright infringement. He sued Paramount Pictures and won for a show called Future Cop. He sued James Cameron and Orion Pictures for The Terminator, which was settled out of court. He threatened to sue Marvel Comics, but was appeased with a cash settlement for an issue of The Incredible Hulk. He was also a big advocate of authors getting paid and paid well. He worked on Babylon 5, but wouldn't even contribute to the DVD commentary because they didn't offer to pay him for it. Now, you probably want to hear about his more salacious controversies. Ellison allegedly punched an ABC executive for the show Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea because that executive changed the script.
Folks, I have punched out producers who wanted to change the shit out of my work. Whether it would have improved it or not, my work. You want my work, you got to get my approval. If I'm insane, don't give me your money, because that's the only thing you have to offer me. Fame I'll get on my own, quality I produce on my own, good or bad, I stand on my reps.
He punched author Charles Platt at the Nebula Awards because he didn't like the speech. But probably his most infamous moment was in 2006 at the Hugo Awards when Connie Willis introduced him on stage and said, "Are you going to be good?" And Ellison then touched her breasts. Obviously, I wouldn't put that at the level of sexual assault, but at the very least, it was a gross invasion of someone's body space. And some people were really offended by it. And I certainly won't excuse it, but I wonder if there can be any sort of nuanced response to canceling Harlan Ellison over it. Actually, let me just show you the incident. Decide for yourselves and let me know what you think in the comments.
Thank you. She built these backstage because I wouldn't come in from there.
Are you going to be good?
No.
Let me say that another way. Are you going to be good?
I will eat this. Jeff D is 5, not Jeff D was 5.
I beg your pardon. It's Jeff D is 5 instead of Jeff D. Ladies and gentlemen, Harlan Ellison.
So was that a joke in bad taste that went too far, or was it enough that you would cancel Harlan Ellison? Anyway, when I call Harlan Ellison the bad boy of science fiction, it's not just hyperbole. Wired magazine dubbed Ellison sci-fi's most controversial figure. And I think Ellison would be the first to say that he could be a real asshole. If you want to know more about him, there's a documentary called Dreams with Sharp Teeth that is a bio about Harlan Ellison that was allegedly shot over a 25-year period. It's at 100% critical consensus on the tomato meters in Rotten Tomatoes. Personally, I think he has written some fantastic short fiction, and the 2 volumes of Dangerous Visions should be required reading for any science fiction fan. Okay, I've talked enough about Harlan Ellison. Let me know of any other speculative writers that you want to know more about. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.